I was basically having a panic attack. I cannot cope with being lied to. I just could not believe that you didn't talk to me about this.
Now, this has got to be the moment where I fully own my mistake.
My name is Abby.
And my name is Liam, and you are listening to the Evolving Love podcast.
In this podcast, we deep dive into the topics of non-monogamy and relationships, drawing from our experiences of being consensually non-monogamous for over a decade.
Whether you're monogamous, polyamorous, curious, or anything in between, we invite you to join us for this conversation.
Let's begin.
Welcome, dear listeners, to another episode of the Evolving Love podcast. And we are back this week with a fantastic question that was submitted to us.
This is a question about trust. And have we ever broken one another's trust?
The question reads, have you ever broken each other's trust? And if so, how did you get past it?
Brilliant question.
Juicy.
And it's made us dig deep.
It has made us dig deep.
We've had to go deep into the relationship archives.
I think it's important to share some of the times where communication wasn't great.
Of course.
Because there are times where communication's not great, and also times that have been definitely formative in kind of learning how best to approach the discussions that we have with each other, just in a relationship, whether it's to do with non-monogamy or whether it's due to just being in a relationship together.
For sure. So this situation actually happened within the first year of our relationship. So we were still monogamous. We were very close, sharing a lot, communicating, all of that, but we weren't sort of having the big non-monogamy discussions yet, I don't think.
No.
We were living overseas. We had been together for, I can't remember exactly. I think
it was probably almost 2 years maybe, because it was our first year in New York, our first full year in New York, because I had started to do some gigs, which is very important part of this equation and the answer to this question.
So you are a gigging musician in New York at this point, working for an agency.
Yes.
Working for a booking agency. So there were these things called showcases.
Yes.
So you would, perform with the bands, and then people would come and watch the band, and then, you'd get booked for these gigs.
Right.
But the job entailed a bit of travel. So sometimes you'd be driving in the car with the band or mini bus or whatever it was. And you'd be going on little trips upstate or whatever for 2-hour drives.
Yeah, it was like corporate gigs. So playing covers, lots of pop songs, soul songs, like a whole mix of different types of music.
Yes, a whole mix of music, jazz, the whole thing.
Yes.
So, and I remember coming to one of these showcases and there was another singer on stage with you. And I remember she was incredibly handsy. She was touching you a lot. She was very flirty.
Yes.
I felt very uncomfortable.
Right.
And then I remember after the gig, you came straight over to me and you were like, hi, blah, blah, blah. I think I had arrived halfway through, so you were already playing at that point. And then she wandered over to you. And I think she walked past you or something, but she started rubbing your arm. She sort of was very friendly with you.
I didn't even remember these details, but.
Yeah, she was very friendly. Yeah. She was rubbing your arm. She sort of came over and then you introduced us, her and I. And I remember she sort of blanked me. She brushed me off.
She wasn't very warm.
She was not warm. And she was just very cold, but I think she continued then to touch your arm and then she walked off and then she came back to you at another point. By this stage, I'm seeing red. I felt so upset. I felt really uncomfortable. So that we had an awkward discussion later that night, I think because I sort of went into shutdown mode. And we all know that mode where it's one person shuts down and then you were sort of had a feeling that something had happened, but you hadn't done anything wrong.
Right.
So you're sort of is everything okay?
And I think it's important to kind of really flesh out this scene because for this to kind of fully make sense and for us to kind of get into the weeds and for me to really own the mistake that I did make in this situation, I think it's important to fully understand the kind of breadth of the mistake, just so it makes complete sense. Because we were new to New York, and at that stage we were kind of really trying to establish ourselves in the city. I was trying to establish myself as a musician. This was very early on in working for this particular corporate agency. So I really wanted to kind of put my best foot forward. I really wanted to be agreeable and fun and like a really nice addition to the kind of music team. Mm-hmm. And with these showcases, there were lots of different singers. So maybe there was each showcase that you're referencing now, there was probably, 10 to 12 singers. Mm-hmm. There'd be half females, half men. I was one of the male singers. And then the idea is for these corporate gigs is that each of the singers, there'd be usually a male singer paired with a female singer. Mm-hmm. So I was not, because I was very new to these showcases, it was probably one of my first showcases, if not the first showcase, where you met this particular singer and she was giving you the cold shoulder. To me, I was also kind of in my brain of like, okay, I really want to put my best foot forward. I want to seem like a really agreeable kind of person to work with.
So what are you saying by agreeable? Are you saying that you were flirting back and things like that? I didn't.
No, not at all. But I think it is, it was definitely something where there was so much going on and I was trying to deal with establishing lots of new relationships with lots of different people, is that I also at the time, I don't think I remember really being as aware, obviously, as you were, of like different things like that.
I'm super aware.
Very aware.
There's nothing goes past me. Very sensitive person. I remember after that gig, I was upset. We're chatting. And then I said, look, I don't like that girl. I don't like her. Yeah. I've got weird vibes. She was quite rude.
It was like a sisterhood thing. You didn't feel respected in the sisterhood.
I didn't feel acknowledged. Yeah. I didn't feel respected. And this is like not a non-monogamy thing at this point. This is just...
No, this is just a relationship thing.
It's just weird. I just felt blanked by her and I felt like she was all over you and my warning signs were just like... My intuition was like, don't trust her. I said to you later that night, probably an unreasonable request. I said... I don't want you doing any gigs with her. The other women are lovely, but I don't want you going and doing gigs with her. I don't want you in the car with her. Mm-hmm. I don't like her. I don't trust her. And I don't want her to be forming any sort of, having any kind of bond with you. And if you end up on any gig, you're not to be in the car with her.
Yes.
Like I was so intense about it. I was really upset. Yeah. And you were just like, of course, I totally understand. Like, yep, she was really rude. With the whole thing.
Yes.
Fast forward maybe 6 months.
Yeah. Well, probably not even that many months. But an important thing to say is that I wasn't arranging who would be on the band in the gig. So someone else would book that. So I actually wasn't the decider of who would be put together with bands. There'd be every weekend, go out with different bands, different singers, different personnel. One week I'd be with one particular singer and a whole band. Then maybe the next week I might be with another. And because we were very new, and because I really wanted to kind of prove my worth as a musician, within this particular kind of agency, I was also very keen to kind of just take any gig that I got offered.
Of course, you weren't going to be difficult. The reality was you said to me in that moment, yes, of course. Like, I totally get what you're saying. Yeah. You de-escalated, like you helped me calm down. Yes. It was all good. But then...
And I also
weren't going to go then and like send an email. Like, you're so new. You didn't want to be difficult and be like, oh, by the way, I don't want to do this gig because my wife got the weird vibes from this other singer. Nothing's happened, but like it just isn't the vibe. And I get that. And you know what? Now I just wouldn't do that. So I really want to share that like I would not carry on like that. Right. But I was... When was this 11 years ago?
This was
11 years ago. Yeah. So it's like I really was at a different stage. And also I was not particularly happy at the time because I was still establishing my friendships. I was
we were new to the city. We were kind of like finding our feet. You were new to your job that you were working at the time. And I think there was a lot of moving parts. So it was a kind of stressful environment.
It was
kind
stressful.
of initially.
It was stressful and I just didn't have, I think I was homesick. Like I was easily activated by stuff.
Yes.
I was sensitive.
Yes. And when it initially happened and you kind of brought up those concerns when you had first met her, and that was also the time where I had first met her as well, in the same occasion, initially in the moment, I didn't notice anything untoward. But as soon as you brought it up, I remember being like, oh yeah, I do notice that. Like it definitely wasn't a situation where you misread it. I really felt that like you had brought up a very fair point, and it wasn't like I thought, no, like you're just seeing into something that isn't even there. I was like, oh yeah, I can see how that was kind of weird. Or like she wasn't super warm to you and maybe, you know.
She needed to just balance out and be more in the middle. Like she doesn't have to be so overly familiar with you. And she can be a little bit nicer to me.
Especially considering I had just met her.
Yeah, it was weird. Honestly, it was weird.
Yes.
Okay, so then fast forward, I remember it was like the middle of the night. Maybe it was a few months later.
Right.
And you got an email. And like you and I have always been very open with our phones and stuff. Like we've never hid things. We've never I would so happily just leave my phone anywhere and you can just, you know, I mean, we don't really go through each other's phones, but we never hide it.
I think from the very beginning, we were just like, okay, we're going to always just have an open phone policy. Like I've got nothing to hide from you. You know, you can check my phone whenever you want. You know, I don't have any things on the side to keep secret. And so that was always the case.
It's always been, super important. But we don't really snoop. But sometimes we'll check.
Right.
If it's like, you know, or like you can see the drop down. You can see if it's like, like a family member or like something, whatever. Yeah. Anyway, you were asleep one night. The phone was there. Your phone like lit up or something. And it was an email and it was from this girl. In a group email.
Should we give her a name? I do remember her name, but
I remember her name too. It started with L.
Should we give her another name that starts with L?
Sure. Libby.
Libby. Okay, let's go with Libby.
I don't know.
I was thinking Laura, but Libby's cool. Let's go with Libby.
We'll go with Libby.
Okay, I like Libby. Yeah.
Because I don't really know. Actually, I do know one Libby. She's really lovely. So there's the email from Libby in the group chat. In the group email, organizing logistics because you and her are going in the car together to the gig on Saturday night upstate.
Yes.
And her asking what time you're going to pick her up or pick up the band members.
No, what time she was going to pick me up.
I can't remember because I'm pretty sure I turned into a dragon. Yes. I just could not believe that you didn't talk to me about this.
Yes. Now this has got to be the moment where I fully own my mistake. Yeah. Because I understand you were annoyed, and we'll get into why you were annoyed and how annoyed you really were.
I don't even think I need to get into it. Yeah, we all know at this point.
You were very upset because we had come to the arrangement that obviously I had said, you know, I would let you know if there were any situations. I think I'd also said, you know, I'll let you know if she was in the band with me to like let you know. Now, I remember in the lead up to this gig, this was one of the first gigs that I got booked on. And you were so uncomfortable that first night. Now, I would like to say, dear listener, that I fully admit that I handled this completely poorly and in completely the wrong fashion. So I just want to own that. There is no excuses coming, but it is important to explain exactly what happened. So I had thought in my mind, okay, there's a gig happening. This is like one of the first gigs for this agency. I do feel uncomfortable saying, hey, I can't do this gig because my wife didn't really get good vibes from Libby. Thanks, Libby.
And you also felt uncomfortable to talk to me about it. You were like, also, I'm pretty sure you were 23.
I was young, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't excuse the situation.
No, but it's context.
It is context. So I had made the poor decision, that I don't even think I told you that she was on the gig.
You just didn't want to have the conversation.
I didn't want to have the conversation. So I said, I'm really happy, got booked for this gig. It's on the weekend. I'm going to get a lift, because also the interesting thing was in New York, I didn't have a license at that point, and I wasn't driving a car in New York until a few months later. So obviously I needed a lift. Now, getting to a gig upstate that's going to take a few hours, it's a long way to walk.
And you've got all of your gear.
And I've got all of my gear.
Speakers, so microphones.
I do somehow need to get to this gig. So it wasn't like I had a car and I could have just easily driven myself. It's like I did need someone in the band to give me a lift. And if it wasn't going to be Libby, it would have had to have been someone else. But what I had done is I'd made the decision, as poor as it was, to think, I'm just not going to tell you that I'm on a gig with Libby, and I'm just going to do the gig and then somehow afterwards be like, oh, I just did the gig. And then you go, how was it? And I go, great, Libby was on it. And then that would be the moment. And even saying that now, obviously that is a bad idea.
This is really interesting because I don't remember this being such a conscious decision for you. In my memory, it was like I haven't told you yet, or like I was going to tell you. But I guess that's it.
It would have had to be conscious.
It would have.
Well, this is the thing. It's like people talk about lying and people talk about just kind of withholding the truth. Now, in this situation, you didn't ask me. I don't remember you asking me point blank who's on the gig and then me saying someone else's name.
Yeah, but that's not the point.
But that's not the point. That's not the point. And what I'm saying is that by not telling, I knew it would upset you, but I chose not to tell you.
Yeah.
And whether it was unconscious or conscious, I'm pretty sure it would have been conscious because otherwise I would have just told you. You know what I mean?
We talk about everything.
We talk about everything.
And that's what flipped me out. It became it was all about the fact that you hadn't told me.
Right.
And that this was happening and like that you were in some sort of communication with her, organizing these logistics, and I hadn't been told. Was I going to be getting told? We'd had this.
Right.
So I instantly triggered again all of the stuff, but it became about the fact that you withheld the truth, which to me is very much a lie when it's something that is around this. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like it's so great if people are getting around being like, oh, well, he never asked. Like, and it's like people aren't going to be, you don't get home from work and everyone's like, did you have any emails and plan anything with that woman from 3 months ago? Or like, did you, or people like, oh, did you have sex with someone you weren't meant to have sex with? Like people don't do that.
It's not like, a constant question that you get asked every day. Yeah.
No, exactly. So that was really just wild to me, but you immediately...
I freaked out.
You freaked out.
Well, because you were so upset. And immediately... I knew this was the dumbest way I could have handled this.
Yeah.
I was like, this is so just poorly done.
Yeah.
But then I was also in the eye of the storm. It's like, I think it was like maybe 2 days later that or maybe like the day, like.
You couldn't get out of it.
I couldn't get out of it. And it was like, okay, well, now I've got a really upset partner.
I was basically having a panic attack because I cannot cope with being lied to.
Yes.
I can't cope.
I mean, not many people can. So that and it wasn't on you for being upset. Like, and that was the difficult thing, is that I knew that I had buggered up and I just couldn't see, and I couldn't get out of the gig short of saying, I'll just say I'm sick, because then for the reasons I mentioned before, it would have been really awkward because I was trying to, make a good impression.
I know. Look, you did the best that you could. And I want you to know that I completely am so over this. And we moved on from it. We spoke about it so much.
We move on from it.
How long do you think it took?
Oh, it took us a long time to move on from it, in the sense that
you were in the doghouse for ages.
Yeah, like
was it
a year.
Few weeks?
No, like because it was and fair enough.
I don't remember being angry with you for a year.
No, you weren't angry with me for a year, but it was a situation that you didn't forget. And because I'm a musician and I'm always in situations like this with colleagues and going to gigs and doing all that kind of stuff, is that there was always, and I certainly never forgot, because I was like, okay, that is a brutal lesson for me. Like, I should have had the difficult conversation. And that would have been so much better if I did have the difficult conversation, as opposed to just kind of hoping it would magically work out, which obviously it didn't.
No.
So for me, it was like, okay, I really fucked that up.
Mm-hmm.
But moving forward, I have to learn from that, because I don't want to feel that level of like rightful animosity that you felt towards me at the time. Because I was like, it was crazy, because I was like, obviously it makes sense that you're so angry at me. But I just didn't kind of imagine what that situation would play out like until it was actually playing out.
Yeah, things were hard. Things were hard. And at that time, we didn't have the luxury of you not taking that work.
Yes.
Or anything like that.
Yeah.
So it's like you just said yes, tried to look at the bigger picture, because also you know yourself. Like, you know that you wouldn't have gone on the gig and bonded with her and started some emotional affair that then leads into some actual affair, or she becomes your work gig wife or whatever that ridiculous work wife, work husband crap is. Right. And like, you know yourself. So you actually, I think looking back, you probably felt pretty secure that it's like, okay, I can just go, like, it's not actually a threat.
Yes. Well, I think,
it's not a threat.
I think that's fair. I think I was thinking, you know, there's no risk. There's no genuine risk. Like, even if she's flirting with me, I'm not interested. Yeah. Like, it's not like I'm going to be tempted by Libby. Libby isn't going to tempt me, you know, singing a song.
No.
And so I thought, you know, I trust myself, so you should trust me. Which doesn't make sense, really. Well, I mean, it kind of makes sense.
It does now.
In isolation.
Yeah.
But not even now. I mean, it's like we have the history of our relationship to build that trust. But I think it was a really formative moment, because it was the first, and since then, like when we read this question, I was like, that is a great question. But we actually had to go that far back to think of a time where the trust was broken.
I couldn't think of it, because I just went straight into thinking about if I've broken your trust. And I couldn't think, I mean, there's definitely, of course, like, we're all human.
Yeah, I just think that that's something that we are very clear on with each other, is that the importance of trust and how delicate trust can be if broken.
Yes.
You know, and even in that moment, like, it's not like I went out and had an affair with her and then we had to work through that.
No.
You know, but it had gravity, especially because we were quite young in our relationship.
Yeah.
And young in general.
Yeah.
And in a new environment, in a new country, in a new city. So it felt very heavy. If you're enjoying this episode of the Evolving Love podcast, we invite you to follow, comment, and subscribe. Sharing the podcast with friends, family, or lovers is the best way to support the Evolving Love podcast.
If you are interested in diving deeper and accessing my premium writing archive and other exclusive content, you can sign up at evolvingloveproject.substack.com. Yeah, it did feel like we were sort of in new terrain, because everything up until that point had been so transparent.
Yes.
And I mean, bless your heart, like, you weren't trying to... Like, I mean, you left your phone there, right there. Like, you weren't sort of
I wasn't doing a great job at...
Like, you're not like, oh.
No.
You know, I had a situation once with another boyfriend.
Yeah, let's focus on other boyfriends.
Yeah, I found his other phone.
Oh, yeah.
So this was not my other long-term relationship.
You found the burner phone.
This was the in-between.
Yeah, right.
You know, we all have that in-between. Anyway, yeah, he was a bit of a nightmare.
Right.
But I found his second phone under my bed in a jacket pocket, because he left his jacket.
Did it ring or something?
No, it was just like...
It was just there.
Yeah, and it was like an old... It didn't even have a password.
It was that old.
Because he had his iPhone.
Yeah, right.
So this was in 2011.
Okay.
Yeah, and I found the other phone. I mean, that was an awkward chat.
Yeah, I bet you weren't too happy about that one.
I mean, that's a whole other thing.
Yeah, I mean,
but it's a common story.
That is a whole other thing.
It's a common story. And I just never...
The burner phone? Is it?
Yeah, I mean, just this behavior, just this sketchy, weird, hiding, lying thing is just not...
Right.
I just didn't want us to be that.
Yes.
I just don't have time for any of
And also,
that.
I don't have the disposition, like I get too much anxiety.
It's just not who you are.
To imagine like coping with that.
No, and it's not, it wasn't calculated. Like you were just.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was
conscious that
it was calculated in the sense that I had in my mind made the decision to not talk about it with you would save the pain of the lead up to something that I felt like I had to say yes to the gig. So I was just like, how, like it would have just made the lead up to the gig more painful and trickier. And we should have, I think, obviously I should have had those discussions, and I'd do it differently. But if I were to ask you the question, what would have been the best way for me to actually handle that situation in your mind? If we could replay the clock.
Okay. So if you were more well-versed in having communication skills and knowing how to have hard communication.
Yeah.
I think as soon as you got the gig offer and as soon as you saw her name, you'd say, hey, I want to just have a chat with you about something.
Yeah.
When's a good time? Everything's good because I can't cope with someone. If someone's like, I need to talk to you about something, I have to know immediately. Like I can't wait 5 minutes. It's immediate.
So it's actually asking you whether it's a good time. You're still going to say, I need to know.
And then I'd say, yeah, but I'd appreciate that you'd ask.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Yeah, nice. Okay, awesome.
But I'd say, okay, what is it? And you'd say, look, I haven't responded and I want to talk to you about this because I'm not quite sure what to do. But you know how there was that woman, that girl who was on the gig, that one that really didn't acknowledge you. And that was shit. And we spoke about that and you said, you know, you don't want me to do gigs with her. Totally understandable. So like bringing it up, validating my feelings.
Right.
You know, acknowledging the situation and acknowledging that, hey, this is a thing. But the difference is like then including me in it and saying, I've got the gig offer.
Right.
This is how much the gig pays. This is the situation. Also, and I haven't said yes to it yet.
Okay.
I haven't said yes to it yet.
Yep.
But this is the situation. And I mean, if I were to do the gig, there's also another layer to it, which is that she's actually giving the band a lift.
Yes.
But I would be with the band. But I haven't said yes and I haven't said no, but I just want to talk to you about it because I want to see how you're feeling now about this because it's been a few months. And before I turn the gig down, you know, it is this amount of money and which wasn't not like it's good money. It's out of town.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, you know, what do you like? What should we do?
Okay. Now, imagine, let's game plan this because that's
the way you do it. Because you're bringing me in it, we're making the decision together.
Right. But if in that moment, like thinking back to where we were at that time and how uncomfortable you felt with with Libby, right?
Libby activated me.
Libby activated you. And it's also really difficult because we were new to the city and our relationship was still relatively new, you know? So the perceived threat of a Libby it could potentially be like, you know, way more intense because you're like, I don't want, you know, my partner jumping ship for someone, you know, we've just moved to a new country. Like you're feeling quite vulnerable. I
felt very vulnerable.
Right.
Yeah.
So it makes sense that you would feel such a level of protectiveness. But if with all that being said, if we were to kind of play that ideal kind of way of me bringing it up, asking, is this the right time? You know,
tick.
All the ticks are done. What do you think your response would have been?
I would have said yes.
Okay.
I would have said yes.
Yeah.
Because we did need the money and I wanted, and we can think long game.
Right.
And because you would have included me in it.
Okay.
It would have felt like we're a team and this is something that we're navigating and we're making the decision together.
Right.
Because I understood when we worked through it all, because it wasn't about that. And like when we spoke about it and we came together, it was so not about whether or not you were going to go and do anything with her.
Right.
It was about the lie. It was about the fact that you had hidden this
the omittance
thing. Yeah, and I think also time pulls the heat out of things. It's like with her and that situation, it wasn't a serious thing. It was like she was just kind of not really in the sisterhood. She wasn't very friendly to me. She was rubbing your arm, but it wasn't like a major crisis. It wasn't like I walked in on you and her backstage making out in the green room and, you know, whatever. There's like a ripped up photo of me on the floor. Like it's
I got her name tattooed on my arm.
You know, it's just there wasn't anything like that. It was just like I got weird vibes. She wasn't cool. And that made me feel uncomfortable. And I get activated. Also, I didn't know anything about like emotional regulation, really. Like I didn't have that stuff. I wasn't like, okay, Abby, you're getting like really triggered. This is like a, you know, I need to just go and have a few like breaths and like have a glass of water and like chat with Liam.
Night, which is not like if you want to find out this kind of information, the worst time is probably in the middle of the night.
It was like 10 p.m. or something.
Yeah.
Oh, you mean when I found out with the emails?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
You see what I mean?
Yeah, for sure.
Because it's like that's catching, like being sleepy and receiving that information. You're not going to have the perfect emotionally regulated response, is my point.
No.
Yeah.
And you just feel like it's that thing. It's like these days, it's like everything's in the phone. Everything's going to come out. And of course, it's like triggering. Like we've all had that. I mean, not we've all, but I mean, so many people listening to this, I'm sure, have had that moment where it's like there's something in the phone, something comes up that shouldn't be coming up. So I didn't want to see an email from her saying, what time am I picking you up?
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, it's unbelievable the amount of affairs that are found out because there's like iCloud is syncing across the iPad, and it's the story that you hear so much.
It's the secrecy. Like I've had situations where I've been on our laptop and your iMessages have been connected, and I'm like watching Netflix in bed or something, and then there's like drop down messages from someone who you're chatting with or dating, and I'm seeing this one-sided
that you know about
but I know about it.
Yeah.
And honestly, it's like it's not like I'm going to go snooping everything. If I'm watching something, I'm doing something, I'll just turn the notification off. Like I'm just like, okay.
But a lot of cheaters, if the partner doesn't know about it and suddenly they see, you know,
it's very easy to find out.
They see Libby dropping down.
Yeah, you just sync the device. Like you just wait until your partner's asleep, log in, sync the device, wait until they go out, and then, you know, open up the iPad and
it's party time.
And then it's party time.
Is that the technique?
I've got some stories from some friends. Yeah, I know what happens.
Wow.
Yeah, you can just sync it all up.
Okay, wait. So let's give a playbook for someone who wants to catch their partner. It's like, are you saying that someone would sync? How does it work? Because that makes sense.
Well, I haven't actually done it.
I know you haven't done it, but you've heard it.
I'm not like a technical person.
I know. I'm imagining you trying to sync iCloud. You'd be like, "Hey, can you help me sync iCloud?" And be like, "Why are you doing that?" And you'd have to be like, "Oh, it's, you know, I'm trying to catch you out." I'm like, quickly delete everything. Delete everything.
I'm just a cutie when it comes to this stuff. Okay, so I'm pretty sure you just sync devices or something, don't you?
Sync devices.
Like you go to settings and then you go to, or you just, I don't know, don't listen to me, everyone. You just Google it.
Okay, just Google it.
Okay, you just Google it. Like that's what you like. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. And this stuff happens all the time. And then it ends up in monogamous relationships. That's often how cheaters get caught out.
Yeah, always. Always these days, I feel.
Which is wild to me.
It's wild.
Yeah. So interestingly with Libby, so, you know, it's important to kind of finish and round out this story.
I feel like there's so many more things I could say about this.
I know. Let's keep on talking about it.
Okay.
Yeah. We're gonna focus on Libby for this episode. And so, you know, it was interesting because we had this very intense situation where I had, you know, let you down by not telling you about this. We'd had a big upset, but I still had to play the gig. You know, because I couldn't pull out. And I think at the time in the crisis moment, I was like, I'll do anything. I'll send an email. I'll, you know, quit the business. Like I'll say that I'm sick. I'll do whatever. And
well, everything became, I mean, not that we were going to break up, but everything became very like, oh, like I was very much like, I thought we had one kind of relationship happening.
Yes.
But now there's actually this.
This had reframed almost everything in your mind, especially in the eye of the hurricane. You were like,
you'd have done anything.
You were like, you've been living a lie. Like, what else have you? And this
I did go crazy.
This is also the kind of thing.
I was screaming.
Yeah, totally. But this is also the kind of thing where people, when they see like a crack in, my truthfulness and honesty, is you go, well, you start to look at everything else and you go, well, what else have you not told me? Like, have you been, in the green room with, other people? But it starts to kind of almost feed into this kind of, understandably, almost like a paranoia.
Yeah. I don't think I went that far. I don't think I thought, I don't think it was one of those situations like how it can be for many people when they discover an affair, where it's like everything that they knew to be true, their whole reality is like now crumbled because they question everything. It wasn't that. It was just like, I just thought we were closer than that.
Yeah.
Like I just thought that we were a team.
Yes.
And I just didn't feel like we were a team.
Yeah.
Because we didn't navigate that together. I was left in the dark because you didn't want to hurt me. And you wanted to do the gig and you just wanted to do the gig, be on your good behavior.
Yeah.
You knew you were going to do the right thing. And then hopefully I wouldn't ask, make the money, and then
well, I think you were
life
also,
goes on.
I think when something like this happens, there's like a sense of mourning of like this pure relationship. Because everyone starts off on an equal playing field. Whenever you get together with someone, it's like, okay, there is like a beautiful equilibrium here. You haven't done anything. It's so new. Like no one's done anything to really fuck up.
It's pure.
It's just so pure. And then suddenly
we're going to do it right.
Yeah. And then suddenly it's like, it's like a New Year's resolution where you say, I'm not going to eat any sugar. And then like suddenly you just like have a bag of Skittles.
Yeah.
And then it's like, oh, fuck it. I may as well just eat all the Skittles.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of worry is that something like that. And especially if, potentially if I had a different reaction, like if I'd have thought, oh, you're kind of blowing this out of proportion, Libby is actually not a real threat. So I'm just going to kind of dismiss your annoyance and the upset that you felt. I think that would also have moving forward proved really problematic.
That's a really good point. You never invalidated my feelings. Like you always were just like, I completely should have told you. I totally understand. You're so upset. Like, what can I do? This is the situation. Like, and you really owned that. Like, you weren't gaslighting me. It didn't turn into a fight. Like, I don't remember it being a fight.
I think it was a one-way fight.
Like, I was really upset.
I think you were really upset. It depends on what you call, I guess a fight has to be a two-way thing.
I mean, I woke you up in the night.
Yes.
And started yelling at you.
Yes. Yeah.
So this is a long time ago. Like, isn't something that we wouldn't do this now.
No, I mean, but
like we don't have situations that come up like this. It's not how we handle things.
Yes.
But it was a very emotional time. There was stresses and I just couldn't cope. So I woke you up in the night and I just screamed. I think I like threw the phone. Like you were just like, what is going on?
I was like, oh, I need to wake up.
Oh my gosh, what's happening? Like, I got up out of the bed. Right. It was like, I don't know. It was like midnight.
Yeah.
It was a whole thing.
Yeah, it was a whole thing. But also from my recollection, I just remember kind of just letting the tsunami come. I was just like, especially because I was like, I can't argue this because I know I fucked up. Like it's on me. Like I everything you were upset at me. I think the interesting thing in that moment was because you were so upset, like the things that like everything just became so extreme that I felt it was disproportionate in the broader scheme of things.
It was.
At the time, I was like, this is just over getting like on paper, it's like, I'm just getting a car ride to a gig and I have to get a car ride. But obviously it's so much more than that. But in the moment where the tsunami was coming, I was thinking, oh shit, like how do I stay afloat? Like this is, but also I was like, this feels disproportionate, but certainly it's not the moment when you're like coming at me with like, how could you not tell me about this and all that kind of stuff. The worst thing I think I could have done would have been saying, it's not a big deal. Like, why are you even worried about this?
Yeah, I mean, you definitely knew not to say, like, you shouldn't be getting so upset.
Yeah,
that would have just been.
That would have been. I don't know what would have happened.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's. I definitely would have been.
Look, I'm not a big star sign person, but I am an Aries.
Right.
The fire was well and truly lit.
Yeah, the fire was burning.
Yeah, the fire was burning.
Yeah, it was a bushfire in that small Park Slope apartment at that point. But it's like, even in that relative, like, we were, as far as our relationship goes and our communication goes, we were still pretty immature in the sense that we had just never kind of come across something like that together before.
Yeah.
And so there were definitely things, I think, obviously me not kind of getting us into that situation in the first place is a good place to start. But I think maybe the extremeness with the reaction, maybe potentially you would dial that back in retrospect.
Totally.
And
of course.
But in the moment, it's like you can't have a perfect argument.
No. I feel really sad actually thinking back at that and where we were and how stressful things were and how you were actually trying to navigate the situation by actually choosing the least harmful path for me because you knew that I was having a hard time.
Right.
So it's like I know I can see so clearly now.
Yeah.
And I did see it afterwards. Like, it took a little bit of time, but like, I really can see it from your perspective as well. That you were trying to not tip me over the edge, but also help us together by saying yes to that gig.
Yeah.
Because we needed that.
Yeah, and it was the foot in the door that ironically, from that gig came a lot of other gigs that kind of kept us, that was kind of the backbone for us living in New York for 6 years. So So it, in the same situation,
we never would have met beautiful Andrew and Christina, who we've had on our podcast with the Conscious Monogamy episode.
Yes. Yeah.
If it wasn't through that work, and so many other incredible friends,
lifelong friends,
and work, and we were then able to live in New York for years, and it was really important that you said yes to that gig. And
Libby almost,
you would have burnt the bridge.
Almost buggered it up.
Libby
almost buggered it up. But then from that point on, so Libby was someone who I did do other gigs with. On very rare occasions.
Yeah.
Which was interesting.
Yeah.
Because like then you had to we had these situations where you were like, okay, this has happened. Like, we've worked through this. I have been very repentant. And I was. I didn't try and make excuses, didn't try and get out of it. I was just like, I've got to own this one. And then, but other gigs did happen.
They did.
But I think naturally she started, for other reasons, just not doing that many gigs. So in the end, we didn't have to play many gigs together. She was always kind of like, she never stopped. Like, it wasn't like she ingratiated herself to you over time.
No.
And I think that's an important thing, is that the initial sense that you got of Libby was an accurate one. Was that like, I don't know about her.
She was never warm. I'm a friendly person. Right. And I continued to be friendly to her and say hi.
Yeah.
And she continued to be very unfriendly and she just seemed kind of snobby.
Right. Yeah.
And
because in an ideal world, after that situation, she would have been like super cool with you, and I've been like, and eventually it would have been like this, I can't believe that, like, now she's our best friend or something, like, and that has definitely happened because in certain situations, some women, I feel like in those kind of music circles and creative circles, is that they are very kind of touchy and affectionate people, and sometimes people are kind of in that environment and they are very touchy, not to try and be sleazy or to try and be romantic or to try and like shoot their shot, but they're just naturally in that environment. And then, that can take some, navigating.
Yeah, I mean, it probably she might not have clocked anything and had no intention
I don't think
for
she
anything.
Did.
I think it's just her personality.
I think it was her personality. Yeah.
And her personality mixing with where I was at that time. I was highly sensitive.
Right.
And just saw her as a complete attack.
It was combustible. It was one of those situations where it was almost like the perfect storm.
It was.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we got through it.
We got through it. And, you know, I think there were a lot of things that we learned from that. And I think there were, you know, a really, certainly for myself, like it is something that I've never forgotten, you know.
Yeah.
And it is actually something that I keep very present in my mind of like why communication is important. And I think we both do that, right?
Yeah. We definitely do. It's super important. And yeah, it's really interesting to think back to that time and where we were at and how we would definitely deal, both of us, how we would deal with that situation so differently now.
Yeah.
But also being kind to where we were at and not sort of hanging on to it. Like I don't think of this as like, oh, you've broken my trust this time. Like it's just a part of our story. It's not like you know, like I've got one up on you because you had that moment.
Yeah, but people often ask us like, you know, about questions about communication and all that kind of stuff. And I think, you know, this was a very formative experience for us.
It was.
And it actually set the bedrock of us having good communication, even though the actual problem arose because of my bad communication.
It was definitely we are not going to have this type of thing happen again.
Right.
We are sticking to this honesty, openness. Right. We are a team. Mm-hmm. We navigate different things. There are going, and then having also those chats of there are going to be times where people outside of our connection are going to vibe with us or potentially try and, you know, I think back then we weren't exploring the non-monogamy stuff really, or like early days of chatting. I don't think anything had come about too much, but it was like we started having the chats about there are going to be people who might try and jump in on our thing or potentially have an affair with us or take one of us away or whatever it was, because it's like this is the reality of relationships. These things do happen, but that we were going to be a united front. Yes. And that was really bonding. So I think you know, looking back, I think a lot of good things came from that as well.
In that moment of the flurry of activity and those really intense conversations, you know, it is nice to think that something good came from all of that. So that is our answer to that fantastic question submitted by our listeners. And we did get lots of other questions in the course of that, and we will definitely get to them in subsequent episodes because there's some really juicy, interesting stuff. But we wanted to get into, you know, that really nuanced and kind of question that, I mean, has to involve me admitting that I made a big mistake. But I am happy to admit that, you know, that hasn't happened again.
No.
Which is good. And it makes me a far less anxious person moving through our relationship.
Yeah.
You know?
Definitely. Beautiful.
Yeah. But thank you for listening to the Evolving Love podcast, and we will talk to you soon.
Bye.
Thanks for tuning in to the Evolving Love podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and leave a comment on your favorite podcast platform. Your feedback and support fuels our passion, and together we're building a community of curiosity, kindness, and growth.
Subscribe, comment, and let's keep the conversation going.